Listen, I need you to understand something right from the start. I am not a coward. I served in the Velkarian Imperial Fleet for 23 cycles, earned 6 combat ribbons, and personally commanded 3 successful planetary acquisitions. My Chaitan plates bear the scars of 17 separate engagements. So when I tell you what happened at the human colony world they call New Haven, believe me when I say this is not the testimony of someone who panics easily. My name is Thresh Karvolan, Wing Commander of the 3rd Expeditionary Assault Group, and I was there when everything we thought we knew about warfare got turned upside down and inside out by a species that should not, by any reasonable military doctrine, have been capable of what they did. The briefing seemed simple enough. Actually, it seemed laughably simple. New Haven, General Crix announced, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction as the holographic display rotated before us in the strategy chamber. Population, approximately 400,000 humans. Defenses, minimal. Orbital stations, 2, both civilian-grade. Military presence, a single frigate-class vessel, outdated by their own fleet standards. Estimated resistance time, 4 hours, maximum. I remember looking around at my fellow commanders. Vesh was picking at his feeding tube. Clearly bored, Thorin was already calculating how quickly we could establish mining operations once the surface was pacified. Nobody was worried. Why would we be? We had done this 68 times before across 42 systems. Humans were relatively new to the galactic stage. Everybody knew that. They had been stumbling around space for only about 2 centuries, which in galactic terms is roughly equivalent to a larva's first molt. Sure, they had a few impressive ships, but their technology was derivative, borrowed, adapted from species who had been spacefaring for millennia before Earth even knew other worlds existed. Deployment timeline is standard, Crix continued, his voice carrying that particular tone of a commander who has given this exact speech too many times to count. We drop from hyperspace at 0600 local time, establish orbital superiority within 30 minutes, begin atmospheric insertion at 0700. Ground forces should have the capital secured by noon. Question. Vesh finally looked up from his feeding tube. Do we expect any support from their main fleet? Dekrix's mandibles spread in what passes for a Velkarian smile. Their nearest battle group is 16 light-years away, even if they received word immediately, which they will not because we will jam all communications. They cannot arrive for at least 4 days. This will be over before they even know it began. That got a few chitters of amusement from the assembled commanders. I probably chuckled too. Looking back, I wish I could reach through time and slap myself. We dropped from hyperspace exactly on schedule. 47 ships materialized in the outer system, a force sufficient to conquer most established worlds, let alone a frontier colony. Our sensor arrays lit up immediately, cataloging everything in range. The 2 orbital stations registered on scopes right where intelligence said they would be. The human frigate, designated Valiant according to our translation matrices, was in a standard patrol orbit around the 4th planet. Scan complete. My sensor officer reported. All targets accounted for, no surprises, no anomalies. Excellent, I said, settling into my command chair. All ships, begin approach vector, weapons to standby. Communications, prepare the standard surrender demand. That is when the sensors started screaming. Commander, my sensor officer's voice cracked slightly. I have multiple contacts. They just appeared on scopes. They are by the ancestors. They are everywhere. I pulled up the tactical display and felt my secondary heart skip a beat. Ships, dozens of them. No, not dozens. Hundreds. They had not jumped in, they had just appeared, like they had been sitting there the entire time with some kind of stealth technology that our sensors had completely failed to detect until they chose to reveal themselves. Give me a count, I demanded, keeping my voice level despite the ice forming in my circulatory system. Still compiling, Commander. Currently at 276 distinct contacts and rising. They are in a distributed formation surrounding the entire inner system. We are inside their perimeter. Combat vessels? Affirmative. All of them. I am reading destroyer class, cruiser class, carrier class, and wait, confirming 3 dreadnought class vessels. Commander, this is a full battle fleet. Multiple battle fleets. As his voice crackled over the command channel. This is impossible. Intelligence said they had nothing in this sector. I was already running combat calculations in my head, and every single one came back with variations of the same answer. We were in serious trouble. Communications. Get me General Crix, I ordered. Before my communications officer could respond, every screen in my command center flickered. Then they all displayed the same image, a human female, middle-aged by their standards, with short dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that looked like they had seen significantly more combat than any human should have. "Good morning," she said in flawless Valkyrian, her mouth movements completely out of sync with the translated words in a way that was deeply unsettling. "I am Admiral Jessica Kwan, commanding officer of the United Earth Colonial Defense Initiative New Haven Sect. We're currently surrounded by elements of the 1st, 3rd, 7th, and 9th Fleets, comprising 342 combat vessels. Your ships are targeted. Your exit vectors are blocked. You have one opportunity to surrender." I found my voice, though it came out rougher than I intended. "This is Wing Commander Thresh Kar-Volan of the Valkyrian Imperial Fleet. Your display of force is impressive, Admiral, but surely you realize this is simply delaying the inevitable. The Empire has resources far beyond what you see here." Admiral Kwan smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Commander Volan, let me be very clear. You arrived in our space at 0600 local time. Did you think we would not notice? Did you think we would simply be asleep?" She leaned forward slightly. "We have been tracking your fleet since you entered the outer marker 3 days ago. We let you come here. We wanted you here. And now you are going to learn a lesson that 68 other species learned before you." My sensor officer made a strangled sound. "Commander, she knows about our previous campaigns. She just referenced the exact number," Admiral Kwan continued as if she had heard him. "Humans have a saying, Commander. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. The galaxy has been fooling us for 200 years, telling us how young we are, how inexperienced, how we should be grateful just to have a seat at the table." Her expression hardened. "We are done being fooled, and we are definitely done being underestimated. You cannot hold us," I said, with far more confidence than I felt. "Even if you destroy this fleet, the Empire will send more. Many more." "Oh, we are not going to destroy you, Commander," Kwan said, and that smile returned. "We are going to send you home. Every single one of you. Alive, unharmed, so you can tell your Empire exactly what happened here." That was, somehow, more terrifying than any threat of destruction. "All ships," I broadcast on the fleet channel, "maintain formation. Do not, I repeat, do not engage unless fired upon." General Crix's voice came through, tight with suppressed rage. "We cannot simply surrender to these primitives. Volan, the Empire does not." "The Empire is not here, General," I snapped back. "We are, and we are sitting in the middle of a kill box that they prepared specifically for us. Look at your tactical display. They have firing solutions on every single one of our ships. This was a trap and we walked right into it." The command channel went silent. Then Vesh spoke, his voice very small. "How did they know we were coming?" Admiral Kwan appeared on our screens again. "Would you like to know? I think you would like to know." She gestured off-screen, and the display split. On one side remained her image. On the other appeared a schematic that made my blood run cold. It was a perfect diagram of our invasion plan. Approach vectors, deployment timelines, target priorities, everything. 6 months ago, Kwan explained, your intelligence service inserted an operative into our colonial administration network. Very clever, very professional. His cover was excellent. It took our counterintelligence teams almost 3 weeks to identify him. She paused. "We let him stay. We fed him exactly what we wanted him to find. We made New Haven look weak, vulnerable, tempting. And you did exactly what we predicted you would do." Vesh was cursing steadily over the command channel now, a stream of increasingly creative profanity in 6 different languages. "Tactical," I said quietly. "Give me an honest assessment. If we fight, what are our odds?" My tactical officer did not answer immediately. When she did, her voice was flat. "If every shot we fire finds a target and every shot they fire misses, we might disable 40% of their fleet before we are eliminated. In any realistic scenario, Commander, we would last approximately 12 minutes. 12 minutes. 68 successful campaigns, and it all came down to 12 minutes. They are hailing us again," my communications officer said. "Put her through." Admiral Kwan looked almost sympathetic now. Almost. Commander Valen, I have reviewed your service record, 23 cycles, 6 combat ribbons, 3 successful acquisitions. You are a career officer, not a fanatic. So I am going to make this very simple. Surrender now. Your crews will be treated in accordance with the Galactic Convention on Prisoners of War. You will be held for 6 months, then repatriated to Valkyrian space with your ships and your dignity intact. And if we refuse, her expression did not change. Then we will destroy you in 12 minutes and 9 seconds. Our tactical computers are very precise, same number my tactical officer had given me. These humans had run the same calculations we had. I looked at the tactical display one more time. 342 ships, 3 dreadnoughts, firing solutions locked. We had been outplanned, outmaneuvered, and outweighted by a species the entire galaxy had dismissed as newcomers. Pride is expensive. Lives are irreplaceable. General Crix, I said over the command channel, I am ordering a general stand-down. All ships will power down weapons and prepare to be boarded. You do not have the authority, Crix began. I am invoking Provision 7 of the Fleet Operations Code. I interrupted. As senior combat officer present, I am assuming tactical command in an unwinnable scenario to preserve forces. You can have me executed when we get home, General, but right now, I am saving 47 ships and 14,000 lives. Silence. Then, very quietly, Crick said, order acknowledged. All ships stand down. I turned to my communications officer. Signal the Admiral. We surrender. The boarding parties arrived within 20 minutes. I had expected arrogant victors, perhaps some gloating. What I got instead were professional military personnel who treated us with courtesy and efficiency. They secured our weapons, secured our ships, and processed us through a system that had clearly been designed and practiced many times before. I was placed in a holding cell that was honestly nicer than my quarters on some ships I had served on. Clean, climate-controlled. Even had entertainment access, though only to approved educational materials. One of those materials was a documentary about human military history. I watched it because there was literally nothing else to do, and because I needed to understand what had just happened to me. Humans, it turns out, have been fighting each other for their entire existence as a species. They have refined warfare to a degree that makes most galactic militaries look like amateur theatrical productions. They have fighting doctrines that go back thousands of years. They have studied every aspect of conflict, from logistics to psychology to tactics to strategy, and they have done it not against alien species but against themselves. We thought they were inexperienced. They were not inexperienced. They were just new to fighting aliens instead of each other. There was a section on something called deception operations. The narrator, a gravelly-voiced human male, explained how human militaries had been using elaborate deceptions to mislead enemies for centuries. Fake armies, false intelligence, misdirection, making the enemy see what you wanted them to see, believe what you wanted them to believe, go where you wanted them to go, like making a colony look weak and vulnerable. I sat in that cell and I laughed. I actually laughed, because the alternative was screaming, and screaming would not help anyone. We had invaded at dawn thinking we would catch them sleeping. They had been waiting in orbit the entire time, and they had known we were coming for months. On the 3rd day of captivity, Admiral Kwan visited me personally. She entered the cell alone, which either spoke to great confidence or great foolishness. Given what I had learned, I suspected it was the former. Commander Valen, she said, pulling up a chair and sitting across from me. How are you being treated? Better than I deserve, I admitted. Better than we would have treated you. She nodded slowly. I read the reports from the other worlds your empire conquered. I know what you did. What your people did. Her eyes were hard. That is precisely why we are treating you well, Commander. Because we want to be very clear about who we are. And who are you, Admiral? We are the species that remembers every war we have ever fought, every battle, every mistake, every victory, every defeat. She leaned forward. We are the species that spent 10,000 years fighting ourselves and learned every possible lesson about warfare the hard way. We are the species that will absolutely positively not be conquered because we know every single trick, tactic, and strategy that you might try. We have already used them on each other. The galaxy will not take kindly to such arrogance, I said quietly. Admiral Kwan smiled. Commander, do you know how many species have tried to invade Earth itself? 12. Do you know how many succeeded? 0. Do you know where those 12 species are now? 6. Are client states of the United Earth Government. 3. Signed mutual defense pacts with us. 2. Have treaties that prevent them from operating within 100 light-years of our space. And 1, well, 1 does not exist anymore, but that was a mutual extinction scenario that worked out slightly more in our favor. I felt my feeding tendrils curl involuntarily. You destroyed an entire species. They destroyed themselves, she corrected. We just accelerated the process after they glassed 3 of our colony worlds and killed 80 million people. Turns out when you make humans angry enough, we get very creative and very thorough. She stood, straightening her uniform. You will be released in 5 months and 27 days, Commander. You will be given your ships back. You will be given full records of this engagement, and you will go back to your empire and you will tell them exactly what happened here. She walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Commander, we know about the other 3 fleets your empire is preparing to send. We know their staging areas, their departure windows, and their target packages. We will be ready for them too. The door closed behind her, and I sat in that cell, feeling the weight of what was coming. We had thought we were invading a weak colony. We had actually been invited to a demonstration, and the demonstration was very simple. Do not mess with humanity. The months passed slowly. We were not mistreated, but we were very thoroughly kept under control. The humans were nothing if not professional. They gave us regular medical care, adequate food, even recreation time, but always, we were watched, always studied. I spent the time reading everything I could about human history that they made available. It was educational in the way that discovering fire while your hand is in the flames is educational. These beings had fought world wars, multiple world wars. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet and had actually come close to using them on several occasions. They had turned entire continents into battlefields. They had siege warfare, aerial warfare, naval warfare, space warfare, cyber warfare, psychological warfare, economic warfare, and about 40 other types of warfare that most species had never even conceptualized. And they had done it all to each other. By the time they reached space, they had already mastered every aspect of organized violence that existed. They just had to adapt it to new environments. We never stood a chance. On the day of our release, Admiral Kwan addressed all the Valkyrian officers together in a large assembly hall. You came here to conquer, she said, her voice amplified to reach every corner of the space. You believed you were superior. You believed we were weak. You believed wrong. She activated a holographic display that showed the New Haven system, our invasion route, and the positions of all the human ships that had been waiting for us. This was not luck, she continued. This was not chance. This was planning, preparation, intelligence, and patience. We knew you were coming. We chose to let you come, and we chose to send you home alive so you can deliver a message. The holographic display shifted to show a map of Valkyrian space. Then it zoomed out to show human space. Then it zoomed out further to show the entire galactic arm. Humanity claims 173 colony worlds, 42 major stations, and 17 allied species. We have mutual defense agreements with 61 governments. We have trade relationships with hundreds more, and we have standing military forces that currently number, she paused for effect, approximately 9,000 combat vessels of all classes, with production capacity to double that number within 2 years if necessary. The numbers were staggering. Impossible. Except I had seen the evidence with my own eyes. Your empire has threatened human space, Admiral Kwan said quietly. Other empires have threatened human space. All of you made the same assumption. You thought we were too new, too young, too inexperienced to defend ourselves properly. She smiled that unsettling smile again. We are not. The holographic display shifted one more time, now showing what looked like naval formations surrounding dozens of systems. These are our current fleet positions. I am showing you this because I want you to understand something very clearly. We are not hiding. We are not afraid. We are here. We are ready. And we are waiting. If your empire wants to test us again, you are welcome to try. But understand that what happened here at New Haven will happen again, and again, and again. Every single time. She deactivated the display. You will be escorted to your ships. You will be given safe passage to Valkyrian space. You will deliver this message to your government. And then, Commander Valen, you and I will probably never see each other again. I hope, for both our sakes, that is true. We boarded our ships in silence. The humans had even repaired some minor damage that had occurred during our stand-down. They had restocked our supplies. They had, and this was the part that really drove the point home, loaded detailed tactical analyses of our entire operation onto our computers. They wanted us to see exactly how thoroughly they had outmaneuvered us. As my ship pulled away from the orbital station, I took one last look at the New Haven system. All 342 human vessels were still there, arrayed in perfect formation, a silent promise of what awaited anyone else who made the same mistake we had. My communications officer looked at me. "Course for home, Commander, course for home." I confirmed. We jumped to hyperspace 3 hours later. Behind us, New Haven continued its rotation, completely undisturbed by what should have been its conquest. The humans went back to their normal routines, secure in the knowledge that they had proven their point. The trip home took 16 days. I spent most of it writing my report, knowing that every word would be scrutinized, questioned, and probably disbelieved. How could I possibly explain that we had been completely outplayed by a species barely 2 centuries into space exploration? But I had to try, because Admiral Kwan was right. They were not hiding. They were not afraid. And if the Valkyrian Empire or any other empire chose to test them again, it would end the same way. Humans had spent 10,000 years learning how to fight. We had just given them 200 years to figure out how to apply those lessons to space. The galaxy was going to have to adjust its assumptions about humanity, and adjust them quickly, because the days of underestimating Earth were over. The debriefing lasted for 3 days straight. 3 days of sitting in a windowless chamber deep inside the Imperial Military Command Complex on Velkar Prime, answering the same questions over and over again, while a rotating panel of generals, admirals, intelligence officials, and even a few members of the Imperial Council themselves tried to find some way, any way, to make what happened at New Haven sound less catastrophic than it actually was. Explain again how they knew you were coming. Grand Admiral Tesh demanded for what had to be the 15th time. He was old, even by Valkyrian standards. His chatin plates dulled with age and scarred from battles fought before I was even hatched. Your report claims they had advanced intelligence for months. How is that possible when our security protocols are among the most rigorous in the galaxy? I resisted the urge to click my mandibles in frustration. With respect, Grand Admiral, their counterintelligence identified our operative within 3 weeks of his insertion. They then deliberately fed him false information designed to make New Haven appear vulnerable. Everything he reported back was calculated to draw us in. So you are saying our intelligence services are incompetent? Another voice chimed in. This was Director Zan of Imperial Intelligence, and he sounded considerably less calm than he had during the previous sessions. I am saying the humans are better at this than we anticipated, I replied carefully. Their military deception capabilities are, from what I observed and what they showed us during our captivity, extremely sophisticated. They have been practicing these techniques on each other for thousands of years. Thousands of years of tribal warfare, Zane scoffed. How does that translate to modern stellar conflict? I pulled up one of the files the humans had provided us. May I present Exhibit 17 from their historical archives? This is documentation of an operation they called the Ghost Army during their Second World War. They created an entire fake military division using inflatable tanks, false radio traffic, and actors in uniforms. They convinced their enemies that a major assault would come from one location while the real attack happened elsewhere. The deception was so successful that enemy forces remained pinned in the wrong position for weeks after the actual invasion. I switched to another file. Here is Exhibit 23, Operation Bodyguard. They convinced an entire empire that their invasion force of over 1 million soldiers would land at a completely different location than intended. The enemy had concrete intelligence, actual documents, even a corpse planted with false plans. All of it was fabricated. All of it was believed. The chamber fell silent. These are just 2 examples, I continued. Their archives contain hundreds of similar operations, thousands if you count smaller tactical deceptions. They have academic institutions dedicated to studying military deception. They have textbooks on the subject. They teach it to their officers as standard curriculum. General Crix, who had been sitting silently in the corner since the debriefing began, finally spoke up. His voice was bitter. So what you are telling this council is that we were outmatched from the beginning. That our entire operation was doomed before we even left port. Yes, General, I said quietly. That is exactly what I am telling you. Grand Admiral Tesh leaned back in his chair, his feeding tendrils curling and uncurling in agitation. This council needs to understand the full scope of what we are facing. Commander Volin, you spent 5 months in human custody. You observed their facilities, their personnel, their procedures. In your professional military opinion, what would it take to successfully invade and hold a human colony world? I had been dreading this question because I knew my answer would not be well received. It cannot be done, Grand Admiral. The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Mandibles clicked in outrage. Someone threw a datapad that clattered against the wall. I sat quietly and waited for the chaos to subside. Explain yourself, Commander. Tesh roared over the noise. I stood, activating the holographic display in the center of the chamber. May I present the tactical analysis the humans provided us upon our departure? This is their assessment of what would be required to successfully invade New Haven specifically, based on their current defensive posture. The hologram showed the New Haven system with layers of defensive zones overlaid in different colors. Layer 1. I began. Long-range sensor nets extending out to 3 light-years from the colony. These are passive systems, very difficult to detect, impossible to jam without revealing your position. They detected our fleet 3 days before we arrived in system. I highlighted the next layer. Layer 2. Automated defense platforms in the outer system. 217 units, each carrying enough missiles to engage multiple targets. They are networked, so destroying some does not blind the others. They can operate autonomously even if communications are disrupted. Another layer appeared. Layer 3. Mobile fleet elements. These are the ships that were waiting for us. But here is the critical detail. What we encountered was only 60% of the defensive fleet assigned to New Haven. The other 40% was positioned in neighboring systems, ready to reinforce within hours if needed. I let that sink in before continuing. Layer 4. Orbital defense stations. These are not the civilian stations we detected. Those were decoys. The actual military stations are concealed using stealth technology we cannot currently counter. Each station is essentially a small fortress with enough firepower to engage a cruiser-class vessel. Layer 5. Atmospheric defense grid. Surface-to-orbit missiles, energy weapons, and point defense systems covering every major population center and industrial facility. Attempting to land ground forces without first achieving complete orbital superiority would be suicide. And Layer 6, I finished, highlighting the final element, is the civilian population itself. New Haven has 400,000 residents. According to the humans, approximately 60% of their adult population has some form of military training. They have mandatory service requirements. They have civil defense organizations. They have weapons stockpiles distributed throughout the colony. Even if we somehow fought through the first 5 layers, we would be facing a guerrilla war against a population that knows exactly how to conduct one. I deactivated the display. To successfully invade and hold New Haven would require, at minimum, a force 10 times the size of what we sent. It would take months. We would suffer catastrophic casualties. And even if we succeeded, the moment we withdrew the majority of our forces, the human counterattack would retake the world within weeks. And this is just one colony. I added quietly. They have 173 of them, all with similar defensive arrangements. Director Zan stood abruptly. This is defeatist propaganda. The humans want us to believe they are invincible. They do not want us to believe anything except the truth. Director, I replied. They showed us their capabilities because they want us to make an informed decision. They could have destroyed our fleet. They chose not to because they wanted us to carry this message back. They want the Empire to understand exactly what a war with humanity would cost. Grand Admiral Tesh raised a hand, silencing the murmurs that were starting up again. Commander Volin, you have clearly given this considerable thought during your captivity. What do you recommend? This was the moment. This was where I would either salvage my career or destroy it completely. I recommend we open diplomatic channels immediately and negotiate a non-aggression treaty. I recommend we formally recognize their territorial claims, and I recommend we warn every other empire in the sector to do the same. That is capitulation, someone shouted. No, I said firmly, that is survival. The humans do not want our territory. They do not want to conquer the galaxy. They want to be left alone to develop their colonies in peace. But if we push them, if we force them into a war, they will win, and the cost to us will be devastating. General Krix surprised me by standing. I agree with Commander Vorlin. Every head in the chamber turned to look at him. I was the senior officer on that operation, Krix continued, his voice steady despite the tension. I ordered the invasion. I approved the intelligence assessments. I believed we would achieve an easy victory. I was wrong. He looked directly at Grand Admiral Tesh. The humans outplayed us at every level. Intelligence, strategy, tactics, execution. They did to us what we have done to dozens of other species. They made us see what they had us to see, believe what they wanted us to believe, and go where they wanted us to go. And then they crushed us without firing a shot. He gestured at the holographic display. More importantly, they did it in a way that demonstrated overwhelming capability while minimizing casualties on both sides. That shows restraint, discipline, strategic thinking that looks beyond immediate military victory to long-term political outcomes. These are not the actions of a primitive species. These are the actions of a mature military power. Director Zan was turning an interesting shade of purple. So we just surrender? We acknowledge that 2 centuries of spaceflight makes them our equals. No, Director, I said. We acknowledge that 10,000 years of warfare makes them our superiors in this specific domain. They did not learn how to fight in space over 2 centuries. They learned how to fight over 10 millennia, and they have simply adapted that knowledge to a new environment. I pulled up another file. During my captivity, I had access to their military history archives. Did you know that humans have more than 15,000 documented battles in their historical records, that they have analyzed, studied, and extracted lessons from conflicts dating back thousands of years? That they have something called military academies where officers spend years studying nothing but warfare? I switched files again. Did you know they have a human named Sun Tzu who wrote a treatise on warfare 2,500 years ago that is still required reading in their military academies? That they have a concept called the principles of war that they have refined over centuries, that they have doctrines for every type of conflict from individual combat to planetary invasion to stellar warfare? We have military academies, San protested weakly. We have training programs. I corrected. They have institutions dedicated to the study of warfare as both art and science. The difference is significant. Grand Admiral Tesh held up a hand. Enough. This council has heard your recommendations, Commander Volan. We will take them under advisement. He looked around the chamber. This session is concluded. All testimony from this debriefing is classified at the highest level. Anyone who discusses these matters outside authorized channels will be executed. Are we clear? A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the chamber. As we filed out, General Krix caught up with me in the corridor. That took courage, Volan. Telling them what they needed to hear rather than what they wanted to hear. Will they listen, sir? He clicked his mandibles in what might have been a laugh. The smart ones will. The proud ones will need more convincing. Unfortunately, we have far more of the latter than the former. He was right, of course. 2 weeks later, the Empire dispatched another expeditionary force. Not to New Haven this time. They had apparently learned at least that much. Instead, they targeted a smaller human colony called Riverside, population only 80,000. The invasion force was larger this time, 70 ships instead of 47, and they had adjusted their tactics based on what happened to us. They lasted 18 minutes before surrendering. The humans had been waiting for them too. After that, a third force was sent to a colony called Clearwater. This time, the Empire tried a different approach. Instead of a frontal assault, they attempted a covert insertion of ground forces, planning to seize the colony from within while a fleet engaged the orbital defenses. The ground forces were intercepted 3 hours before landing. Apparently, human satellites had detected the insertion craft during atmospheric entry. The ground forces surrendered after their landing zones were surrounded by what the reports described as an unsettling number of very well-armed colonists who seemed almost disappointed they did not get to fight. The fleet engagement lasted 22 minutes. By the time the 4th Expeditionary Force was being organized, even the most hawkish members of the Imperial Council were starting to understand the reality of the situation. We could not win, not without committing resources on a scale that would leave us vulnerable to every other empire in the sector, not without accepting casualty rates that would be politically unsustainable, not without fundamentally changing how we approached warfare, and that would take decades we did not have. The humans, meanwhile, had made their point. 3 fleets defeated, thousands of soldiers repatriated, detailed tactical analyses provided each time showing exactly how they had won. They were not gloating. They were not making demands. They were simply demonstrating repeatedly and conclusively that attacking human space was a losing proposition. I was assigned to the diplomatic mission that finally made contact with the human government. We met on a neutral station in the border zone between human and Valkyrian space. The human delegation was led by someone named Ambassador Patricia Long, a woman who looked like she had never held a weapon in her life but who negotiated with the precision of a tactical computer. The United Earth government has no territorial ambitions in Valkyrian space, she explained as we sat across from each other in a conference room that was carefully designed to be comfortable for both species. We do not seek conflict. We do not seek conquest. What we seek is recognition of our sovereignty and respect for our borders. Those are reasonable terms, I replied. I was part of the delegation specifically because of my experience at New Haven. The Empire is prepared to negotiate a formal treaty establishing mutual borders and non-aggression protocols. Ambassador Long smiled slightly. Excellent. However, there are some additional matters we need to address. She activated a holographic display showing a map of the local sector. The Valkyrian Empire is not the only power that has attempted to invade human colonies. We have documented hostile actions by the Salt Confederacy, the MRIX Collective, and independent raider groups operating from several unaligned systems. Some of these raiders have been using Valkyrian-manufactured weapons and ships. I felt my feeding tendrils curl. Ambassador, the Empire does not officially sanction such activities. Officially, no, she agreed. But weapons do not transport themselves across stellar distances. We have traced supply chains. We have intercepted communications. We know that certain elements within the Valkyrian government have been supporting these groups, either directly or through intermediaries. She fixed me with a look that reminded me uncomfortably of Admiral Kwan. This needs to stop. Immediately. We are willing to overlook past incidents in the interest of establishing positive relations going forward. But if weapons or ships traceable to the Valkyrian Empire continue to appear in the hands of those attacking human interests, we will consider it an act of war. Is that clear? Perfectly clear, Ambassador, I said. And I meant it. We negotiated for 2 weeks. The resulting treaty established formal borders, mutual recognition of sovereignty, trade agreements, and even provisions for military cooperation against common threats. It was, by any measure, a fair and balanced agreement. It was also a complete reversal of the Empire's previous position toward humanity. When I returned to Valkar Prime, I was simultaneously promoted and reassigned. Promoted to Commodore for my handling of the diplomatic mission. Reassigned to a desk position in the Strategic Analysis Division because, as Grand Admiral Tesh explained, my combat career was effectively over. You did the right thing, Borland. He told me in a private meeting. You told us the truth when we needed to hear it. You helped prevent a war that would have destroyed us. But the admirals who lost ships, the generals who lost face, they will never forgive you for being right. Your name is associated with the Empire's most embarrassing military failure. But fairly or not, that is your legacy now. I accepted the reassignment without complaint. Better a desk than a grave. Besides, my new position gave me access to intelligence from across the sector, and what I learned over the following months was illuminating. The Salt Confederacy had attempted to invade a human mining colony and lost 4 fleets before suing for peace. The MRIX Collective had tried a different approach, attempting to blockade human trade routes. The humans had simply established new routes and then systematically hunted down every MRIX vessel involved in the blockade. The collective negotiated a treaty within 6 months. 3 independent raider groups that had been harassing human freighters simply disappeared. No one knew exactly what happened to them, but the raiding stopped very suddenly and very permanently. Across the sector, empire after empire was learning the same lesson we had learned at New Haven. Do not mess with humanity. But here is what most of them were missing. What I had realized during my time in human captivity and what became clearer with every intelligence report I reviewed. The humans were not just defending themselves, they were establishing a new order. Every treaty they negotiated included trade provisions. Every agreement opened new markets. Every defensive victory demonstrated their military capability while their diplomatic follow-up demonstrated their reasonableness. They were not trying to conquer the galaxy through force. They were doing it through economics and mutual interest. 6 months after the New Haven incident, Human trade goods were appearing in markets across the sector. Their technology was not the most advanced, but it was reliable, well-made, and competitively priced. Their merchants were honest. Their contracts were honored. A year after New Haven, 3 species had signed mutual defense pacts with humanity. Not because they feared human military power, though that certainly played a role, but because they recognized that aligning with Earth was simply good business. 18 months after New Haven, the first joint military operation occurred. A human fleet and a Velkarian fleet, working together, eliminated a pirate stronghold that had been plaguing both our territories for years. The operation was a complete success, and the post-action analysis showed something remarkable. The human tactical doctrines and our own complemented each other almost perfectly. Their flexibility and innovation combined with our discipline and firepower created a force significantly more effective than either of us operating alone. 2 years after New Haven, I was promoted again and given a new assignment: Director of Joint Operations Planning. My job was to coordinate military cooperation between the Velkarian Empire and the United Earth Government. I reported to Grand Admiral Tesh, who had become one of humanity's strongest advocates within the imperial military hierarchy. "You were right, Velan," he told me during my first briefing in the new position. "The humans are not our enemies, they are our future. The galaxy is changing. The old model of conquest and subjugation is dying. The humans are showing us a better way. Do you think the rest of the Empire agrees with that assessment, sir?" He clicked his mandibles, in amusement. "Half of them do. The other half are waiting to see which way the wind blows. But they will come around. They always do. The Empire has survived for 3,000 years by adapting to changing circumstances. This is just another adaptation." He was right, of course. The Empire had survived far worse than an adjustment in foreign policy. But sitting in my new office, reviewing joint operational plans, I could not help but think about Admiral Kwan and that conversation we had in my holding cell. "We are the species that remembers every war we have ever fought." She had not been boasting. She had been stating a simple fact. And that fact had changed everything. I pulled up a file on my personal terminal. It was the complete recording of the New Haven incident, from our arrival in system to our surrender to our departure. The humans had given us copies of everything, including their own tactical communications during the engagement. I had watched it dozens of times, but there was one moment I kept coming back to. It was from the human command channel, right after we had surrendered. An officer was asking Admiral Kwan if they should pursue our ships as we withdrew to a safe distance for hyperspace jump. Her response was immediate and firm. "Negative. We made our point. Let them go home." Then there was a pause, and she added something that had stuck with me ever since. "We are not trying to humiliate them. We are trying to educate them. There is a difference." That was the key. That was what made humanity different from every other species that had achieved military superiority. They were not trying to dominate. They were trying to teach. And the lesson was simple. War is expensive. Peace is profitable. Choose wisely. Most species eventually chose peace. Those that did not learned very quickly why that was a mistake. I had spent 23 cycles in the Velkarian Imperial Fleet. I had commanded ships in combat. I had conquered worlds. I had considered myself a warrior. But the humans had taught me that being a warrior is about more than just knowing how to fight. It is about knowing when to fight. It is about knowing why to fight. And most importantly, it is about knowing when not to fight. We had invaded at dawn, thinking we would catch them sleeping. They had been waiting in orbit, not because they wanted a fight, but because they wanted to avoid one. They had defeated us without firing a shot because that was the most efficient way to achieve their objective. And their objective was never conquest. It was coexistence. 3 years after New Haven, I attended a ceremony at the human colony. They were unveiling a memorial to the incident, and both Velkarian and human officials were present. Admiral Kwan was there, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and commander of all human colonial defense forces. She saw me in the crowd and made her way over. "Commodore Volan," she said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture I had learned to recognize. "Good to see you again. How is the joint operations planning going?" "Well, Admiral," I replied, carefully mimicking the gesture. "We have 3 joint exercises scheduled for next quarter and preliminary discussions about combined patrol routes in the border sectors." "Excellent," she smiled. "This is what we wanted all along, you know. Partners, not enemies. I wish we had understood that sooner, Admiral. It would have saved considerable trouble." She shrugged, another human gesture I had learned. Sometimes the hard lessons are the ones that stick best. Your empire tried to invade, we stopped you, we sent you home, and now we work together. In the long run, I think this outcome is better than if you had never tried at all. How so? Because now there is no doubt, no wondering if maybe you could have succeeded, no lingering resentment that you never got your chance. We settled the question definitively. You know you cannot take us by force, so now we can build something based on mutual respect instead of mutual suspicion. I considered that. You are saying you wanted us to attack? Not wanted. Exactly. But we knew someone would eventually. Better you than a species less willing to negotiate afterward. She looked at the memorial, a simple structure showing human and Valkyrian figures standing together. We learned a long time ago that sometimes you have to fight to earn the right to peace. The ceremony began, and we both fell silent. A human official spoke about the importance of learning from conflict. A Valkyrian diplomat spoke about the strength found in cooperation. It was all very diplomatic and carefully worded, but what I remembered most was what Admiral Quan whispered to me as the speeches continued. We did not invent warfare, Commodore. We just perfected it over 10,000 years of practice. The galaxy is lucky we also learned when to stop. She was right. The galaxy was lucky, because humanity had the capability to conquer half the sector if they really wanted to. They had the military strength, the strategic acumen, and the tactical flexibility to win against any force we could muster. But they did not want conquest. They wanted trade. They wanted allies. They wanted to be part of the galactic community, not rulers of it, and they were willing to fight, very effectively, to defend their right to that peaceful coexistence. I served another 12 years in the Joint Operations Division before retiring. In that time I watched the relationship between humanity and the Valkyrian Empire evolve from wary cooperation to genuine partnership. We conducted 17 joint military operations together. We established combined training programs. We even developed new weapons systems as collaborative projects. The humans never let us forget that they could destroy us, if they chose to, but they also never made us feel threatened by that capability. It was simply a fact, like the speed of light or the pull of gravity, something to be acknowledged and worked around. Other species learned the same lesson, some faster than others. The galaxy adapted, and humanity, those relative newcomers with barely 2 centuries in space, became one of the central powers in the sector, not through conquest, not through subjugation, through being very, very good at convincing everyone that fighting them was a terrible idea and working with them was a very good one. On the day of my retirement ceremony, Admiral Quan, now retired herself, sent me a message. Thank you for being smart enough to surrender at New Haven. You saved thousands of lives that day on both sides. That takes a different kind of courage than fighting does. Enjoy your retirement, Commodore. You earned it. I have that message saved on my personal files. Sometimes when I am feeling nostalgic, I pull it up and read it again. We invaded at dawn. They were waiting in orbit, and they taught us all a lesson we desperately needed to learn. Some species are too dangerous to fight. Not because they are savage, but because they are smart. Humanity was both, and the galaxy was better for it.